Don Barrie, a city resident most of his life, was born in Oakville, active in many sports. It's lacrosse where he left an indelible impression. While acting as chief instructor of the Peterborough Lacrosse School, Don coached teams to 10 Ontario championships. At Thomas A. Stewart Secondary School, he coached football, hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. 3 of his lacrosse teams won Ontario titles. His coaching career took him to other levels, including the Peterborough Junior A team and professional National Lacrosse League teams in Philadelphia and Maryland. In 1978, Don helped coach the Canadian field lacrosse team to a gold medal at the World Championships in Manchester, England. Don's renowned knowledge and organizational skills have been used by the Ontario and Canadian Lacrosse Associations as a course writer and as an instructor. So on Sports Legends of Peterborough and District, Don Barrie, and I'm going to ask this to everybody as we go forward, but when was the last time that you took a glance at your bio?
When was the last time? I walked by it there when, you know, the Memorial Center was open, but I really never looked at it. I can't remember the last time.
And you've been a Hall of Famer in Peterborough since 1988.
Correct.
So in the 32 years that you've been in the Hall of Fame, how much more have you continued to do? I think that most people that would be seeing this would know you from your Examiner column. They would know you from time on the different installments of what your TV has been, whether it be TV Kojiko or McLean Hunter. They know you from local radio. They know your voice. They know your opinions. Yeah. Everybody does at this point, and that's a conversation topic for a lot of people. How much fun is that for you, or how much do you enjoy still being active and still being a voice in the sports community in Peterborough?
Oh, that keeps me going. You know, I've been retired from teaching for 25 years, and I was involved in scouting hockey for 25 years, and that ended in '04 when they had the strike. And since then, I've been sort of hang around the Memorial Center, helped out with the Petes in the press room, and helped out volunteering at the Hall of Fame on game nights for lacrosse and hockey. And I even got involved back in '99. I got dragged back in to coach the Lakers. They were short a coach one year, and Teddy Higgins asked me to coach it, and it was quite an interesting year. Kelly Robertson helped me out on it, and we ended up being coaches of the year of the OLA, and that was quite a nice honor to come back after all those years and come back into the game after the game was just starting to make its big change then, as we call it, the front door, back door game with the offense and the defense. We were just getting into that, and those years were the early years of that, and I found that quite interesting.
Well, let's go back to the early years of Don Barrie. So you're from Oakville. How old were you when you came to Peterborough?
I was 1 year old.
Okay.
It was just before the war, and my dad was kind of interested. He was a chauffeur for the owner of the Toronto Star, who lived in a big house in Oakville, and that's where I was born. And my mother was the upstairs maid, I guess you could say, at the house. Mm-hmm. They both grew up in Norwood, and took the job in the mid-30s, and I was born there. But then Dad came back to Peterborough. He'd been in a car accident and couldn't take part in the war. He came back to work at the CGE, and he started back there in, I think, 41, and that's when I returned to Peterborough.
So then, as you grew up, where is your sports origin story? Where does it begin? What was the beginning of it all for you that led you to just really being just engulfed in sports your whole life?
I guess at Prince of Wales, I played on their soccer team, which is not one of my favorite sports now, but that's all there was in the fall. And I played, you know, softball and hockey, but it was lacrosse. When they started the lacrosse school, they started the lacrosse school in 1948. It was a summer school, and I started in 49. And a fella that I was in school with, Ronnie J., who went on to be in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, he invited me to come down. So I started to play there, and lacrosse, I played hockey and I played some basketball when I was at Teachers College and so on, but basically lacrosse was my sport from then on.
And you're in the Hall of Fame as a builder, in the builder category for hockey and lacrosse, and it talks about your organizational abilities and your ability to write, I guess, so that continues to this day, as we touched on already. But organizing and making sure that sports were there for people, or being an administrator, why were you drawn to that?
Because I wasn't a very good player. I was pretty well in. If I was going to stay involved, I wasn't going anywhere in any sport, but I really enjoyed being involved in the sport. So through my teaching, of course, I was always organizing tournaments and so on at the schools. And we started, Ron Brown and I at Westmount, I started teaching at Westmount Public School. We started touch football there. And we had a lot of fun, organizing it and getting it going. And then I ran the lacrosse school for a number of years after I started teaching. And that was really required a lot of organizing and so on. And all through my high school career, I was involved. I worked hard to get field lacrosse into the schools here, and I was involved at the Ontario level for that. And even at the national level, I got involved writing program for the Canadian Lacrosse Association.
Well, and I've had a chance to speak with you a lot. You're one of the people that, I'm not from Peterborough, as you know, but one of the people that was really great in making me feel a part of the community. We've talked many times, a lot of interesting stories, and some of the things that always kind of pique my interest. You talk about OHL players from when you were the Pete's educational advisor, academic advisor when you were a teacher at Thomas A. Stewart, and crossover athletes. Where there would be guys who were or went on to be NHL stars would play lacrosse or other sports. And you had some interesting stories there. So if you could just pick up some of those. I know Ty Domi was one of them that you would talk about. But those guys, when you had them at TAS, what did they like to get up to outside of the rink or on the sports fields, though?
Well, it was kind of interesting, Dan, because back then Dick Todd and Roger Nielsen really encouraged the boys to stay in school after the hockey season was over. Nowadays, as soon as the hockey season's over, because of the transferable courses and so on, they're gone. They're back to their own hometowns and their own schools, but they stayed. So when I was the advisor, the Pete's academic advisor, they were all at Thomas A. And there was a lot more. There was the grade 13 then, so they stayed in school. A lot of them stayed in high school their whole junior career because they took grade 13 maybe in 2 years. In their last couple of years or their draft year, they didn't take as many courses and so on, but they stayed enrolled. So I had them in the summer or in the spring, and of course the only two spring sports that were available. Rugby was sort of out. The hockey team didn't want the boys playing rugby. And so we had lacrosse and there was track and field. And some of the boys were really outstanding mainly track athletes, but a few field, a couple of them threw discus and so on. But anyway, I nailed them. Most of them hadn't played lacrosse. So my deal was if, the ones I got that were there I thought could transfer to lacrosse, I would coerce them, I guess would be the word, into playing. And like Mike Ricci played, we talked about that. He said he had never played. Chris Pronger played, and it's amazing. Chris Pronger, because he was so young, came here, was a junior lacrosse player.
Okay.
And we went to the Ontario Junior Lacrosse Championships in Oakville, or in Orangeville. And Chris was a 6'4" then, and he was 16, and we won it, and it was amazing. But Ty Domi was, I think, one of more interesting guys, because Ty just transferred his tenacity and his the way he played hockey to the lacrosse field, and of course in high school, any fighting, you're out. well, I don't think Ty finished a game, but I remember, I've always told the story, but we were playing up in Oshawa against a real good team. And they had a number of Whitby junior players on their team, junior lacrosse players. And one that was a real good player and went on to play senior and so on. And he didn't know Ty from, nobody knew Ty then other than this. He was 5'8", and funny looking little guy with the big head and the ears. And so this guy started to chirp Ty and not wise.
No.
And Ty one-punched him and it was over. So he was out of the game. And he was standing over beside me, and there was a noon hour game. Well, the next thing I know, because I knew this guy from the Whitby team, in comes his brother, who'd be mid-20s. And he came over, and I saw him talking to the guy, and they're pointing over at Ty, who's standing beside me, And I said, Ty, keep your head up here. And so the guy came over to our bench and started to chirp him. Gee, Ty one-punched him.
Oh, wow.
And I always remember that. I don't know if Ty remembers it, but I saw Ty there a while back when Max was playing midget hockey here.
Yeah.
I went down, I met Max and Ty, and Ty told Max, through me, that he got me playing lacrosse, he said to Max. Of course, Max didn't know me, but he was relating to that. But that was just one of the incidents that of these guys, and they enjoyed it because there was no pressure on them. They were in the school, and they were contributing to the school, because most of the school time, they're gone right as the bell rings, or even before. They're down to practice, they're gone on weekends. They didn't get to know the students at the school, and in fact, some of them ended up meeting girls there and married them, And I really today even think it's important that they stay when the season's over and become part of the school community, but because of the way courses are set up today, and of course now with the COVID thing, that won't happen.
Yeah, and it's more business-like for the
Yes.
junior players now as well.
Yes.
But those were elite athletes transferring into other sports, and I know Ty Domi, he can kick a football too. We know that.
Yes,
he
can. He kicked for the Argos.
Yeah, we know he's got lots of different skills and abilities. But I've got to ask about Chris Pronger playing lacrosse. I'm assuming he was a long pole.
He was a
Yes,
long pole.
so that transferred to the NHL.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
Did
he
he always have that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was kind of funny when the NHL was on strike. Chris came in here with his agent. He was playing the NHL now, and I said, "Listen, Chris, if you're off this year, I can put a word in for you if you want to play NLL lacrosse, pro lacrosse."
My goodness.
But we had Brent Tully, who grew up in Peterborough, was a great lacrosse player, and he came to TAS. He was at St. Peter's when he was drafted by the Petes. So he added to a team. And another guy that people haven't heard of, Doug Searle, who played here, real good hockey player, but excellent lacrosse player. And I made some contacts, and he was offered a full ride in lacrosse to Syracuse University. Wow. And he and I had a long talk about that, because Doug was on the bubble of being an NHL player or a pro player. And I said, Dougie, take that scholarship. It's 4 years, you'll get a degree out of it. You can still play your hockey after. But he went and turned pro, and he never went. But he could. He was that good a lacrosse player that he was offered a scholarship.
And getting a chance to see all those players go through, and you're seeing them a lot more. You're getting to know them better, obviously, as the educational advisor or academic advisor than the average fan, even their coaches, I guess, when you're getting to spend that much time with them. What was the atmosphere like for an OHL player in Peterborough in that time when you were the academic advisor?
I don't know. The best way to say it, I think, was that there was not near the pressure on them. There was the draft, and they were, all aiming for the NHL, but there was more realism in them that, well, a lot of us are not going to make it. You know, they didn't come in, all of them, they all come in hoping and trying, but realized, hey, school's important. And a lot of them really worked at their school. A lot. I don't know if that's the case as much now, because they basically, because of the way the transferable courses are and so on, but they became pretty good students, most of them. And if they didn't, Roger or Dick wouldn't play them. Like, it just took one phone call from me and the guy was out of the game for the night. Like if he'd skipped or something, and they knew, I just phoned Dick and he'd sit him out. And so there was pressure on them to stay in school and succeed. And of course, that was a big selling point for parents. I remember when Chris Pronger came here, he could have gone to any university in the United States on a hockey scholarship. They were all after him. But his dad, I believe, was a teacher. In fact, he might have even been a principal. And they came down, and I remember on a Saturday morning, I got a call, and the principal and I met the parents, and we took them through the school and we talked about it. And it was very important to them that Chris what the school was like. And as soon as you looked at Chris, you knew this kid's gone to the NHL as soon as he's eligible. I mean, you know, as soon as you see him on the ice, he was as a well-rounded player that I've ever seen coming in as a 16-year-old in my life. I saw Iserman and Ricci and the Stahl boys that all left at 18. Pronger was just head and shoulders over, like he was ready. He could have played at 16 in the NHL, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it probably would have worked out fine for him. He seemed to turn it into an okay career.
Yeah.
Yes, he seemed to do just fine. And getting to know those guys when they do come back around the arena. I know Chris Pronger, he hasn't been back too often, but when he had his jersey ceremony, or Ty Domi when he was here with his son Max, what's it like for you to be able to catch up with those guys at the rink?
Oh, it's great. It really is. Unfortunately, Coley Campbell came back there.
This season.
And I didn't get down to see him, but I saw him. They had the reunion earlier, and well, I had a long talk with Coley, and he went back before I was the academic advisor, but I was doing the broadcasts on radio then with Bill Bennett. So I got that whole bunch of guys. Roger Nielsen's the year they went to the first round robin Memorial Cup in Ottawa, and Coley was on that team. So I've known Coley, Chris King. I see him on occasion when he comes in. Frankie Sleeve was in, and it was kind of interesting. He does the broadcasts at Mohawk Racetrack, I think.
Okay.
He calls and he started doing a little bit of broadcasts when he was playing hockey here. Gary Deladay and Bill Bennett and occasionally I myself helped, got him on the radio and so on. And he mentioned that when he was back, that's what got us start into his career. And now he's, so those kinds of incidents stick with you when you see these guys.
And something that will be there forever are videos of you in broadcasting as well. We have a couple of interesting ones. We have you interviewing Don Cherry. My understanding is Don Cherry did, or at least part of a broadcast. We've located one period of Don Cherry being the color commentator for a Pete's game. We don't have any more than that. And then we have you interviewing him in front of like a teal background with all the logos on it. Your hair was a little bit different back then. But how did you get involved with broadcasting in Peterborough, and what are some of your great memories of that?
Well, it started, I believe it started with a football game. Back then, McLean Hunter decided, I think they had to, by law, have so many hours of broadcasting, and so they did high school football. And I remember I was at the high school. I was the junior coach, so it was a CASA senior game, and Bill Spenceley brought over a tape recorder, and we stood with a mic up on the hill at Thomas A. Stewart, and we did the CASA championship game. And then we went back to the studio, and I was telling you, there was down on Sherbrooke Street, right at George Street there, behind that used bookstore is.
Okay.
And we went in there, and I don't know, he put it together, and we sort of did it and put it over the air. I can't remember all the details.
That used to be a television studio at
That was the
Sherbrooke and
television
George,
studio.
so across from the No Frills right now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's where McLean Hunter had their little studio,
Okay.
because there wasn't much of a studio. It was just an office with a room at the back, because before that they didn't have to broadcast. See,
Okay.
and then so we sat, and I guess we talked like we were talking now, and put the football game on, and then I started to do hockey, and they used to just bring the tape recorder up to the press box at the Memorial Center, and one camera down, and we'd tape the games, the Pete's games, and show them on a Sunday afternoon. And it was just black and white with one camera, and I did the play-by-play or the color. And then they got a little more advanced, and they had a pregame show live, and it was an hour before the Pete's game, and it was in the garage at the back there, and that's
Yes.
where this. And we would bring the players down. I'd always have the coach and a visiting player, and the Pete's coach and a player, and we'd bring them down, and it was live, and they just turned the camera on, and like I would set up. I remember one night I set up somebody to come in,
Yeah.
and I'm waiting for him, like I'm just killing between the hockey player just left, and I'm waiting, and in comes the guy, and I didn't know him. It wasn't the guy I had picked, and I'm looking at him. Who's that? And I had no idea who he was, but well, I recognized him, and Kevin Varon used to help me, so he came in, and he sort of was putting the mic on the guy, and he leaned over and he said, "Lou Nanny," and it was Lou Nanny, the manager of the Minnesota hockey team.
Okay.
And so I knew enough about Lou that, so I could interview him. But there was a moment there on live TV that I was like, ooh, we're in trouble here.
Everybody has those moments.
Yeah.
Just glance behind the players, check their name on the back, something like that.
Yeah.
And we do have in the archives, you got into an altercation, an argument on air with, I think it was a coach from
Bill
NAG.
LaForge.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that's something entertaining that we look back on. So, like, I have that on my desktop on my computer. I'll watch that from time to time.
Yeah.
But at moments like that, like how do you get to be in that situation? What was the lead up to that, where it got, I guess, heated between the two of you?
What happened was it was the playoffs between Niagara Falls and Peterborough, and it was a hotly contested series. And Bill LaForge was he was a Western coach that they brought into the East, and he was a strange guy. And there are all kinds of stories about what he used to do. Had his players sharpen the bottom of their visors, so if there was fights, the guys would, things like that. Now, whether they happened or not, but guys would, well, anyway, I knew one of the guys on the Niagara team, and he told me through another person that Bill LaForge had sent a player out to run the Peterborough goalie, and he hurt him in the game before, and he ran him. It was so. I had him there, and I said to him, I heard that you sent and I named the guy out to hit the Peterborough goalie.
And I should watch how close I sit to you, because you believe everything that you're told. You believe everything that you're told.
No,
So
I believe
should
what I
not.
see.
No, you
I believe what
believe
I
that
see.
when you were
Everything I
told
saw.
the Thunder was not on TV. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I believe that, yes.
Yes. Why?
Because they can't trust you as a coach.
Well, so you believe everything you believe.
Okay, Bill, it was
I believe so.
Thank you. It was certainly a
good
thrill
luck.
having you
I hope
on
your
here.
team has a better day.
Well, I hope we see you in the Memorial Cup in a year or two. It's been a pleasure. Bill LaForge, our first guest here, and joining us now is our second guest. I'll get this mic off me here.
And so he looked at me and he said, well, I heard, and he used a...
Yes, words that we won't use on
yeah,
air,
we
yes.
won't use on TV, but
Yes.
it was live. And then he took his mic off and threw it at me and left. And I'm laughing like I am now. Here he goes, because I knew he was a jerk.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything. And so I was left there live on TV. And it was kind of funny because a lot of the people would stay, you know, before they came down to the game, they'd watch the interviews to see who I had. And when I was out after, everybody was coming up laughing about LaForge leaving me and what he had said and everything. So, and I know it's been shown a few times since. And so that was one of the interesting times with it.
Yeah, it's good for a laugh. It's good
Good
for a laugh.
laugh,
now.
yeah.
Yes. Now, the Examiner articles, Barrie's beat, like that's like a lot of people will kind of sit and it'll be a conversation topic. It'll be a water cooler topic. I know a guy that we broadcast with, Scott Arnold, when he was at the YMCA, he said that the conversation down at the YMCA after Barrie's beat came out would always be circled around that. Or did you see what he said this time around? But you're giving pretty much unfiltered opinions. I think that's what everybody's view of it is. And for you to be able to express those freely, how much, or what does that mean for you, and how did that get started as well?
Well, it was kind of interesting. When I retired from teaching, it happened to be the summer that we opened the Hall of Fame attached to the Memorial Center. We had built the addition on. It was again expanded in '04 when they did the other renovation. Well, Ed Arnold was there, and I said to Ed, I said, listen, I'm retired now from teaching. If you want me to, I wouldn't mind doing a column if you're interested. He says, well, write me up 3 columns, and I'll let you know. So I made up 3 columns, and he printed them all, and then it went from there. So I've been doing it since '95. So I've been 25 years. I've been writing these columns. I don't think I've missed one in the all that time. Yeah.
And it's just whatever
Whatever
you're
comes
thinking.
up, whatever's going on around, and it's in this current time when there's no sports. I've been going back and looking at old columns and sort of renewing some of the biographies of older sports people, and sort of bringing them up to date, as there's not much sport going on to comment on, and certainly none in the city. So, but yeah, there's always seems to be something around. Our city council seems to always find something to get me to write about.
Yes, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's constant. You're right. And you've faced blowback before, right? Like, people have been upset about something you've wrote or something you've said. Everybody in media will encounter that at some point, but I feel like you encounter it at a higher rate than others. When that does happen, how do you react?
Well, I remember I wrote one back a while ago that the Six Nation team, Six Nation, we're bringing out wood sticks on the defensive end, and I said they should ban wooden sticks. Well, apparently it got down to Six Nations, and they were upset because that's where they make them, eh?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. The NLL won't allow wooden sticks, not even for the goalie, but the CLA will allow them, but the OLA won't allow them. And so that was a real controversial because I got a lot of blowback from that about, well, you're taking the the livelihood of people that make sticks away and so on. Well, I said that wasn't the intent. It was just those sticks are used to maim people. They're not used for any other advantage than that.
Yeah, at some point, the livelihood of the guys who made leather boot hockey skates that went away as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Now, what can you say about Peterborough as a sports city? How would you kind of sum it up if you were to describe it to somebody? Say when you were in Manchester, England, for a world championship, how would you have described Peterborough as a sports city to somebody who had never been here or had never heard of it?
I think the thing we've got going for us is that we're sort of isolated, and we're able to develop our own style of play. That in mainly lacrosse, but in hockey too, and we do it the Peterborough way in a way. We're really influenced by Toronto, of course, with the major league sports and so on. But when it comes to the second level sports and the sports that we're involved in, lacrosse, hockey, soccer, rugby, basketball, we seem to some of the critics call us inbred, but we tend to fold in and play our own style, and lacrosse is maybe the best example of that. We, with some great people back over the years, have developed a style of play that is identifiable across the lacrosse world, which is not a very big one, but as the Peterborough way. They call it the Peterborough pick, when Bobby Allen was really the one that come up with the basketball pick in lacrosse. And it became known as the Peterborough pick. And everybody identified it as that, but it was just the basketball play that we adapted, that Bobby first adapted to lacrosse. And we worked hard at trying to bring all our players up sort of to play the same way. And hockey, of course, when we went junior A was a little bit different because the players were brought in from all over, and it became a different thing. We were on a larger scale, and the coaches were different, they weren't local to them. But I think that's what's unique about Peterborough, that we're able to sort of isolate ourselves from the rest and develop a kind of a special way. You've heard the term Borough Boys, that it's used around, mainly in lacrosse. But it was kind of interesting when the pro lacrosse, Morley Kells, loaded up with Peterborough players when he hated Peterborough players when he coached Brantford. And of course, Brantford and Peterborough had real interesting lacrosse games. And then when the pros started, Morley took the team in Rochester, and Bob Allen took the team to Philly, and Jack Gibson, who was the manager, was involved with the team in Maryland. So the Peterborough guys ended up on the three teams, but most of them were on Philly and Maryland, but there were about four on Rochester that went to Long Island. And Morley, he hated the Peterborough guys in a way that he couldn't control them. Like Jimmy Johnson was there, my brother Timmy was there, Lenny Powers, Jan McGee, the late Jan McGee was on that team, and he called them the snowmobile boys, because at that time the outboard marine were big on making snowmobiles, so he called the snowmobilers. That's how he referred to them. But if there was a big thing coming up, a big play, all four of the guys or five of the guys were on the floor. He relied on them, but he just couldn't control them. And it was kind of interesting years later, he would talk about the Borough Boys, or the snowmobilers, as he called them. And that's what's different, I think. There's not many communities that are that isolated that they can do that and still have the influence of the big city like Toronto.
Just far enough away, right? It's like you call it the Goldilocks zone, and you're not kind of absorbed by the by the news of Toronto is Toronto's news. Like where I'm from in Durham Region news, you're just
Yeah.
paying attention to Toronto. You're not even identifying with your hometown, really. You could say you're from Toronto. People from Peterborough, they say they're from Peterborough.
They're from Peterborough,
And now, continuing on lacrosse, and realization that I've come to, if you pick, let's say, any decade over the last 50 years, and you look at the top 10 lacrosse players in the world, would you say 30% of the top 10 players in the world through any decade are probably from Peterborough?
I'd say even up to 50% of them.
And how do you explain that? With the city of Peterborough is responsible for the top players of the world in this one sport, and I didn't know what a lacrosse town Peterborough was until I started living here and started working here, and it's quite crazy actually. Like it truly is the sport of the town. And from my perspective, it kind of overshadows hockey in a lot of ways. But how do you explain that, and how much of a lacrosse town it is?
I guess you could say it's sort of the Green Bay factor. Like Green Bay, a little town, became an NFL powerhouse. Peterborough loaded up early in the 50s with some players. They had they had their own bowl, and they were able to bring in some quality players, and they had a run of 4-man cups in the early 50s. We were mediocre lacrosse up to that. But that sort of turned it, and the big thing was that we brought these quality players in, and they stayed in the city because they were brought in not as much for lacrosse, but for jobs. There were no jobs around, and we had a large industrial complex here in the city, and we could offer them jobs, and a lot of them stayed and coached, and again, we developed that identity. And then the crowds, we were able to attract crowds. We had our own bowl, the Miller Bowl, that could sit 4,000.
That bowl, I'm going to sidetrack you a little bit here. In the Hall of Fame, there is a diorama of that bowl.
I built
You
that.
built that, yeah. It's one of the coolest things in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I guess for people's knowledge, that's where the National Sports is now or in downtown Peterborough. Is that the location where the Miller Bowl was?
It's the Market Plaza,
Okay,
where
yeah.
the Lakefield Bowl is basically where the bowl was. It faced Townsend Street,
All right.
facing the bus barns there.
Okay, so just for people's context, that's where there used to be a pretty amazing looking lacrosse bowl.
And they built it. The players themselves built it. If you can imagine today, with all our regulations, and unfortunately we have them, but these guys went in and had no plan. I know my dad used to go down and help, and I'd go down. I was a preteen, and I'd go down and watch them build it, and carry wood and do things when they were building it in the late 40s, and they expanded it, and so it was a big attraction because we got good crowds, so we started to bring good players, and we developed a winning attitude. Now it went down a few times. In fact, it disappeared for a few years, and it didn't transfer into the Memorial Center well, and until really they got air conditioning in 2004. We had good teams there, but they struggled to get crowds in there in the heat and that. And then in 2004, when Teddy Higgins reorganized the thing, it took off, and so we were able to draw people in. We had crowds, so we could pay them. There was no doubt about it. We paid them. Other teams can't. They just don't have the crowds, and that's why we've developed these. But a lot of the great ones are local players, like the two Courier boys now have taken off, and Shawnee Evans and John Grant Jr. and so on are superstars or former superstars in there, and they're all local boys.
And similar to the way that Canadian hockey players would go play overseas, say in Switzerland, Austria, and then they'd stay there and be coaches and help grow the game in that way. John Grant Jr., an example of that. He took it from Peterborough and then was in Colorado. He just relocated again to Baltimore, and he's running prep schools and coaching in college.
Yes.
And so the influence that I guess Peterborough is having on lacrosse as a whole, are you able to see that in the way the game is played today? Like at the NLL level, are you able to see that Peterborough influence? I know you talk about the Peterborough pick, but that style of play, are you able to see it everywhere?
Well, the game's changed so much, Dan, since then that the identifiable way that Peterborough guys play is not as transferable as it because of the nature of the game today. It's more of a run-gun game. Back when the game, before they got the front door, back doors we call it, it was more of a slower game. Even though the shot clock came in the 70s, we could run plays and so on in the Peterborough pick. And now it's a speed game, a lot like NHL hockey's a speed game.
It's more like basketball back then,
Yeah.
with up and down the court.
Yeah, they come down and the shot clock's good in a lot of ways, but it's taken away a lot of the creativity out of the game. And I'm one to say that the shot clock should be extended to maybe 45 seconds or something like that to give the players more. But the thing is, I think that the Peterborough influence throughout the whole lacrosse world goes back to the winning attitude. The guys that come in know how to win. They've all been on championship teams from Tyke all the way up through. And I remember I had a novice team with John Grant Jr. on it. There were about five players on that novice team that won the Ontario in '61. They're in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame.
Wow.
I mean, there's not too many teams at that age, that develop, but that winning attitude now, know how to win, know how to really dig down and play as a team win. And that's the attitude that I think has grown out of the city now and is spread across the lacrosse world as it is.
What championship that you were a part of is most important to you?
Well, I think the World Championships in '78, when I was the assistant coach with the Canadian team, and we went over to England, and we had no idea about field lacrosse. We took 25 box players. We had, in fairness, we had about 4 or 5 that were on scholarships to the United States, and they became our key guys, and they were the teachers. But I remember Bobby Allen was the head coach, and he asked me. I was very honored to go along, and John McCauley went. John McCauley was a good lacrosse player and became an NHL ref, and of course Wes McCauley's maybe the most famous NHL. He was our mascot over there. He was an 8-year-old over there. John
Wes
took him,
was.
Wes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, Wes. John took Wes over, but anyway, Bobby Allen and I and John used to go and watch the Americans practice to get ideas for drills. Like, we had no idea, and it was kind of funny. The Americans beat us in the round robin 28-4, if you can believe it. And then we go to the gold medal game. We beat the Australians to get to the gold medal game. And I remember sitting in the dorms there. We were at the University of Manchester, and we were in the women's dorms, which was kind of unique in a way. And anyway, we were sitting in the hall. What are we going to do? And I remember we said, we're going to play box lacrosse on the field. And we shrunk the field. We had guys like Carm Collins and Jimmy Brantford and Brent, and big, tough guys. And I remember they had a guy, and it's sort of an interesting sidelight I'll tell you in a minute, but he was Eamon McEnany, was an outstanding lacrosse player. And Carm Collins hit him a couple of times, and he wouldn't even go near the net. And it took their offense. He just slashed him. Anyway, Eamon was in the World Trade Center when it was hit, and he died in there. And every time I got to meet him, and it just, I knew a couple of the hockey scouts that were in there too, but Eamon was, he lost his life in that horrific thing. And anyway, we played box and beat them in overtime, and that was the first time the Americans had ever been beaten, and I guess 5 World Cups. And we won the first gold. And
Miracle on grass.
Pardon?
Miracle on grass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's one of my most memorable times for a championship.
Now, as a fan in Peterborough, or I don't know if you were directly involved with I'm assuming you were directly involved with most of the championship teams, but were there any that you were kind of watching a little bit from a distance that you enjoyed to watch in terms of a championship team or a great team that you saw in Peterborough?
I go back to a team called a junior team, PCOs, and I had coached that team, or some of the guys, and then I got fired, and I got fired a few times in lacrosse and hockey. Anyway, they went on and they won. They were undefeated 42 straight games. They won the league, which was about 24 or 28 games, undefeated through 2 rounds or 3 rounds of playoffs, and they were undefeated in the Minto Cup. Now, they won it out west, so I didn't see it, but that team was awesome. I've never seen a team that melded, and it was all Peterborough guys. I think they had one fella from Cornwall that had come in. So it was that team then went on and was the nucleus of the Laker dynasties after. But it was an outstanding lacrosse team, and that one sticks with me.
Now, who helped you be you, or who let you be you, or got you to, there was growing up, there was something that inspired you to love sports, and then as you continued to go on, there would have been people that, I guess, kept you going or kept you afloat, or who would you credit as the most important people to you throughout your sports life?
Well, I would, first of all, Bob Allen. Bob Allen gave me an opportunity to coach both in the pro. He asked me to be the assistant coach of the Philadelphia Wings. The first year of the pro in '74, I ended up then coaching the Maryland Arrows in '75. And then Bob asked me to become the assistant coach with the national team. And then Bob and I did a lot of clinics around, and he got me, we were at a clinic in Brockville, and a guy come up to me and said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "Well, I'm hoping to go to a university." He says, "Well, I'm starting a lacrosse team in Sorel. John Ferguson's my coach, the John Ferguson of the Montreal Canadiens. Would you be interested in playing?" So I went down and played lacrosse in Sorel for John Ferguson in '65. And then I went back in '67 and played for Montreal down there. And that was the most fun time I had playing. And it all came from Bobby and I going to a clinic, teaching a clinic in Brockville. So he's been the most influential to me, and I just admire him for what he's done for the game, and how he changed the way the game was played back in the 50s. He and Bobby Curtis, who's also a Peterborough guy, started running in the game, and they had a goalie named Moon Wooten back then who could throw the long pass, and they opened the game up, and then Bob started coaching and brought in the basketball ideas to it, and then he brought those ideas on into the pro later in the 70s, and he's, in my opinion, he's no doubt the most influential for me.
Now, lacrosse, the phrase that everybody says, it's just repeated ad nauseum, grow the game, grow the game, grow the game. I hear it all the time, I see it all the time, and it appears to be a sport that's having a hard time getting together and going in one direction together. It seems to be a bunch of different people want to control it different ways, and that's just my view from the outside. Do you feel like lacrosse is a sport on the rise, and what do you see in its future?
I agree with you that there's just too many people with different ideas about the game, and the CLA is not, it's the governing body, but it does not do a good job governing the game across Canada. The West play and see the game different than the East, certainly at the junior level and at the senior level or at the major level. The Man Cup tends to pull it together, but it's been divisive a lot of the time. And then you've got the NLL, the Pro League, pulling off and doing their own rules and so on, and not really working with the Canadian League that supplies them with the players by running their playoffs long, and as you know, crunching up the NLL or the MSL, the Laker League, so that they have trouble getting all their games in. The problem is that the game is not strong enough to get dominant people in it. Back when they started that pro with Bobby Allen and Morley Kells and Jimmy Bishop, who is a pioneer in the game, they knew they had to work together, even though they were adversaries and coaching. But today, there's no leadership in the game, in my opinion. And it's just a bunch of leagues. There's 2 field leagues fighting each other down in the pro leagues down in the States. There's not enough good lacrosse players for 2 field leagues, but they're hurting each other on it. And then the NLL doesn't work with the MSL, and the East and the West and the junior leagues are having trouble. So it's very divisive, and I think part of it goes back, and Peterborough's as fault as anybody, that you sort of look in to your own organization rather than out, and how can our organization be part of a bigger thing and make it better. And I don't know, it's been that way since the get-go, so I can't see it changing.
Well, you can focus on the local sports scene, I guess, and see success here, as it meant a lot to you. How do you see it developing? Like, what do you take from your past and hope to see future generations in Peterborough get to experience in terms of the sports community?
I think that the diversity of Peterborough, we've got now a university and a community college that have got into sport and are bringing a different perspective to sport. The high schools have taken off. We've got great coaches in all the sports now, and we've got excellent teams coming up. Football is really taken off and allowed for minor. I think, and back to what we were talking, because we're sort of fold into ourselves, I think we've got now a solid base of volunteers and strong leagues around. The unfortunate thing is a lot of the leagues we're in is not as strong as we are, and as you know, those leagues are only as good as the weakest link, and that's a problem that lacrosse has, and even minor hockey and some of the other sports. But boy, with the rugby, we've got their own pitch, and the soccer is very strong. Basketball is, we've got a diverse sport network. I don't think city council plays into it well enough. And the recreation end of the city council doesn't support it to the degree. The arena stuff, trying to build a second pad and so on, like that's hurting minor hockey and minor lacrosse. They can't seem to get their act together on that. And but we do have an outstanding bunch of volunteers, and because we're sort of, again, this entity to ourselves, players come back and coach within. And you look at all the teams are usually players, guys that have played and come back, and their sons and daughters are playing in it, and so they come back. I think of Dave Roach, and Scotty Roach, and the hockey this past year, and the effort, and there's 100 Dave Roaches and Scotty Roaches around in the variety of sports, and that's our strength. I just wish council would support it better with facilities.
If you had to explain it to them, what would you say the value in it is?
Pardon?
Well, if you had to explain it to council, say you have their ear, what would you say to them the value of creating this or of supporting the sports community is?
I think that if we're going to grow as a community and be solid as a community, as our dynamics change, a solid sports recreational base brings people in. I know that people have been recruited, and the one thing that they ask is, you know, what rinks you got, which, or, you know, and what's, can my daughter play ringette or something? You know, do you have those sports? And we have a good base, but we don't support it with facilities, and that hurts us. And I think that's what council has to realize, that that's what makes our city, is the people coming in and the people here staying, because we offer them everything. And we don't offer them enough facility-wise, in my opinion.
And now, before we finish up here, something I'm hoping to ask everybody is what do you want your sports legacy to be in Peterborough? If you think about it to yourself, what is, if you're your own story, what do you want your sports legacy to be?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. That I tried to make the city better through sport. I think I just felt that Peterborough owed me so much, that I wanted to give so much back, as much back as I could in whatever way I could, either doing the history of it and supporting it and writing about it, whatever. And I guess that would be my legacy, that I tried to leave Peterborough a little better than when I started taking advantage of it with its by living here.
And getting a chance to spend time in the Hall of Fame, how much is there in that Sports Hall of Fame that is uncovered, or that you think that people would enjoy to see? How much is there? If you could explain to somebody just how vast that collection is.
Oh, well, I think you just have to ask hockey fans, like, that come in every game, and they say, as they go out, you know, I come here every game and I see something different every time. I see something new. And it's like a museum or something like that, that you go through and then something you've walked by 20 times, and then you stop and look at it and say, oh, that's an old hockey stick from the 1910s or something, you know. And I think that's what people have to, you know, it's a dynamic. Even though we do change the memorabilia in there as best we can, just looking at it differently each time through, you'll see something new when you look at it. And I think that's what our museum and our Hall of Fame is so good at.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Okay.
And thank you for helping to make me feel included in the Peterborough sports community, and thanks for being a guest here.
Okay, thanks for having me.